Until my home, my car, and everything that we owned were destroyed by Hurricane Katrina, the idea of resilience didn't really make any sense to me. The concept that somehow after a major shock or crisis, we could find our way back, not just to rebuild or recover, but actually to find a new way forward, a new normalcy, and be better prepared for the future, that wasn't on my mind at all. So after our house was destroyed, Tulane went on sabbatical for quite some time. We had a lot of time in our very small rental apartment in Houston, Texas. I began to read all the literature out there. What do people believe builds resilience to shocks and disasters? What factors make a difference? A lot of people argued the problems at the individual level. I should get insurance. I should hoard toilet paper. I should make sure I'm ready for that next shock. And that's a pretty common thing to hear even nowadays, thinking about things like floods or fires or COVID-19. But the other side we see actually from governments. Governments often argue that rather than having a kit, we should be helping you out. We're going to build a massive wall. We'll build infrastructure for you. And someplace between the individualization of the responsibility for resilience and those massive walls you see behind me, built by the Japanese government over several hundred miles of Tohoku, Japan, I think the actual answer is someplace in between. Resilience doesn't come from us as individuals. Resilience comes from our networks, the people that we know. And the fancy term for that is social capital. And social capital comes in 3 flavors. Most of us have friends and family who sound and look like us. We call that bonding social capital. We also connect to people that are different than us, different backgrounds, ethnicities, ways of thinking. We call that bridging social capital. And where bonding and bridging are horizontal, some of us are lucky enough to have connections to mayors or governors. Those are vertical connections we call linking ties. Why do these social ties matter so much during shocks and disasters? The very first decision made by anyone after a shock, us after Hurricane Katrina, survivors of the LA fires, people now handling the Jamaican hurricane, is whether or not to return to a damaged home or a business and to rebuild. Rebuilding costs are quite high. There's huge financial costs, there's psychological costs, and there's opportunity costs as well. So why would someone whose home has been destroyed or a family been hurt, why would they go back and rebuild? It's because of a sense of connection, a sense of place. Individuals with stronger bonding and bridging ties, those are the individuals who go back and rebuild, whatever the costs. For someone like me, in contrast, who had few ties to New Orleans, we used exit, and we left as soon as we could. Another reason why these social ties matter during disasters is because many of the challenges can't be solved by one person or one institution. We've got to work together collectively. We call this a collective action problem. And if we have strong social connections, I know you, we've worked together in the past, we have trust, it's much easier to coordinate our behavior, especially after a disaster. But if we've never met before, and our job now is to plan the future of our community, it's a much rockier road. Finally, many of the providers of goods and services that we're used to, places that provide childcare, medical insurance, even places that provide gasoline, are shut down. Not for weeks or months, but it can be for years. So in that gap, how do we get information? How do we get resources? If before the shock, we built those ties, we have what's called informal insurance. We can borrow information, borrow help from people nearby. I'm going to give us some examples now from research around the world, how these ties actually play out. This is an image of people's cell phone signals during Hurricane Irma back in 2017. And notice a few days beforehand, that big red splotch. That's Miami. Many individuals are there. And even as FEMA and the mayor's office warned everyone, please leave the city, many people didn't leave. So that several days later, the blue dots show individuals who evacuated successfully, but many stayed in Miami and had to be rescued from 7 feet of water. So why would people not leave when given the chance? Why wouldn't they believe information? So it turns out, if the only sources of information that you have are people that are like you, bonding social capital, the likelihood of evacuation is very, very low. If, in contrast, the ties that you have are diverse, bridging and linking ties, you're much more likely to leave that area and listen to authorities. There are similar patterns as well, not just in evacuation, but in survival. When Japan faced the March 11, 2011 triple disasters of a massive earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdowns, some 20,000 people lost their lives. In some communities, though, everyone escaped in time. In other communities, 1 in 10 people perished. What helped drive those differences in mortality rates? Strong social connections. In communities where people had neighbors who knew them, could help them escape from a wheelchair or a bed, those communities had higher survival rates. Where, in contrast, people were atomized, they didn't know each other, they'd only been there for a few weeks, in those communities, unfortunately, mortality rates were much higher. We also see this, in fact, in the recovery processes. We've mapped here 9 different communities across Japan, showing different levels of recovery over time. Some of them stuck in amber at about 50% of full capacity. What was it that kept those communities from moving forward? Where until now we've been talking about bonding and bridging ties, horizontal connections, now we see it's vertical ties. If the community that you live in has strong support from government representatives, from corporate representatives, if you have that boost from above, recovery actually goes a lot better. And lest we imagine that mental health is a different ball of wax, in fact, we studied one of the biggest man-made disasters in recent history, the Fukushima meltdowns. 140,000 people had to evacuate. Some only had 2 hours to clear out their homes and have not been back since. So initially, some people envisioned that maybe things like wealth would make a difference, or physical health. In fact, neither physical health nor wealth had an impact on mental health recovery after Fukushima. Only a single factor was protective, which I think you could probably guess. The only thing that we found that mattered was the strength of social ties. If social ties matter then, how do we build resilient communities? Well, when I was a child, every morning Mr. Fred Rogers said, "Daniel, be a good neighbor." He didn't say Daniel, but he said, "Be a good neighbor." What does that mean? If I ask this audience right now, how many of you know the first and last names of 10 neighbors, you would all raise your hands because you're deeply engaged in caring people. But the reality is, in most urban areas, very few of us know our neighbors. And those neighbors will be the first people on the scene in a heart attack, a fire, or a flood. So people help now build connections at the neighbor-to-neighbor level. We also see work at the neighborhood level. San Francisco will give your neighborhood $5,000 every year to have a party called Neighbor Fest. That idea is they can't get ready for the big earthquake that's coming by rebuilding every house or making it stronger. But what they can do is try to build social capital in those communities before the shock arrives. Another policy that matters, social infrastructure, the spaces and places in society, like libraries, parks, cafes, where we build connections to people that are different than us. Civic engagement, making sure that our communities bring as many people as possible into zoning meetings, school board meetings, and planning meetings, building trust there between local residents and their decision makers. Here in North America, faith-based organizations, mosques, synagogues, and churches still play a role in daily lives. And for many individuals, that's how we're building trust and daily connections. And one last idea would be community currency. We know we want more volunteers coming out of their homes, putting down their screens, and spending time together. If we incentivize that, provide in this case $5 from Bristol, that $5 can't be spent at McDonald's or Costco. It would only work at a local mom and pop store. So we get people out of their homes, they volunteer, they spend more time, and the community currency then circulates in the community. I try to argue today that even though I used to think about disasters and resilience as an individual problem or one for the government to handle, in reality, at the end of the day, it's we, neighbors, friends, and networks who make the difference. As we face an era of climate change and rising extreme weather events, the people who build resilience will be us. Thank you.